All right, so today we're diving into something that directly affects a lot of you listening, the upcoming election and how it could impact your immigration journey. Specifically, we're zeroing in on the Cuban Family Reunification Parole Program, CFRP and CBP One. We've got fresh statements from both Trump and the Biden-Harris campaign about where they stand on these programs. And let me tell you, these aren't your typical vague campaign promises.
Yeah, you're right. It's interesting what we're seeing here actually goes beyond the usual rhetoric and gives us some concrete clues about potential future policies.
Exactly. We're talking specific statements addressing the future of CFRP and CBP One. No mincing words. So let's jump right into Trump's recent comment, because he certainly didn't hold back.
No, he did not. Trump explicitly stated that if he's elected, he would revoke both CFRP and CBP One. He even went as far as calling CBP One a bad application, which echoes earlier criticisms from his running mate. This definitely aligns with his track record of advocating for stricter immigration control, and his recent statement urging immigrants who arrive through these programs to prepare to leave further emphasizes this stance.
Wow, prepare to leave. Those are strong words, and for someone whose future depends on these programs, it's got to raise some serious concerns. But you mentioned something important earlier. These are future possibilities, not immediate changes, right?
Exactly right. Even if Trump were to win in November, his new term wouldn't begin until January. So any policy changes wouldn't happen overnight. There's a crucial period between the election and the new administration taking office.
A period of uncertainty for sure, but not one where we're totally in the dark. We have a sense of Trump's direction. But what about Biden and Harris? Did they offer any concrete assurances about the future of CFRP and CBP One?
So this is where their approach differs quite a bit, actually. When Fox News asked them directly about the future of these programs, the Biden-Harris campaign didn't give a straight answer. Instead, they chose to highlight a bipartisan border security bill that actually failed to pass in Congress.
Interesting. So it seems like they're emphasizing past efforts at reform, but not really making any guarantees about these specific programs. It makes you wonder why the ambiguity.
It's likely strategic, I'd say. By avoiding a clear stance, they keep their options open and appeal to a wider range of voters. This way, they can point to a history of seeking solutions while also avoiding alienating more progressive voters who might demand the continuation of CFRP and CBP One.
So for someone whose life is directly affected by these programs, this ambiguity from the Biden-Harris campaign can be frustrating. It's a clear stance from one side and calculated vagueness from the other.
Exactly. It really highlights how crucial this election is for those who rely on CFRP and CBP One. On one hand, there's the possibility of a complete overhaul, and on the other hand, there's uncertainty, even if the current administration stays in power.
It's a lot to unpack, and we haven't even touched on the challenges these programs are already facing. You mentioned lawsuits earlier. What's the situation there?
Right, because it's not just about if these programs will continue to exist, but also how they'll function moving forward. We're seeing multiple lawsuits challenging both CFRP and CBP One, and these lawsuits could have a huge impact on their operation regardless of who wins the election.
Lawsuits. So there's even more to consider on top of everything else. What are these lawsuits about, and what's at stake here?
Well, some of these lawsuits are challenging the programs at their core. They're arguing that programs like CFRP and CBP One actually give the president too much power on immigration, which they say is supposed to be decided by Congress.
So they're saying these programs might not even be legal in the first place.
Exactly. And that's a critical point for anyone who's applied or is thinking about it. Even if Biden and Harris win and they want to keep these programs going, a court could rule against them and force big changes or even shut the programs down completely.
That's a huge deal.
Yeah.
It's not just about who wins the election, right? These legal battles are happening right now, and they could have a more immediate impact than the election itself.
Exactly. It's like a separate track running alongside the election. No matter who's president come January, these lawsuits could completely change the game.
Okay, so we've got election uncertainty, potential policy shifts, and now these ongoing court cases. It's a lot to take in, especially for those whose lives are directly tied to these programs.
Absolutely. It's a lot to navigate, and that's why understanding the details is so important. For instance, some lawsuits are targeting how CFRP and CBP One are being run, claiming they're not being implemented fairly or effectively.
So it's not just about whether these programs are legal, but also how they're being managed.
Exactly. They're raising concerns about things like transparency, equal access, and due process. For example, there have been complaints about CBP One's technical problems, limited capacity, and allegations of unequal treatment of applicants from different countries.
Right. We've heard reports of people struggling to even get appointments through the CBP One app. It's created a lot of frustration and a feeling of unfairness.
And those are all issues being brought up in court. The outcome of these legal battles could force significant changes in how these programs operate, even if they survive these challenges to their legality.
It's clear this is a multi-layered situation. It's
Yeah.
not just about one election or one policy decision. It's about this web of interconnected factors, from political campaigns to legal challenges to the administrative capacity of these programs themselves.
You got it. And it's important to remember that all of this is happening against a backdrop of real human lives. We're talking about family-separated people seeking a better life or safety. Their journeys are directly impacted by these policies, these programs, and these legal battles.
It's easy to get lost in the weeds of the policy details and legal jargon.
Yeah.
But you're right, at the heart of this are real people with real lives in the balance.
And it's their stories that often get lost in the bigger political conversation. Did you know there are families who've been waiting for years to be reunited through CFRP? Their hopes are entirely dependent on this program continuing to exist and actually working properly.
Years. That's heartbreaking. To have your life on hold for so long, separated from loved ones, with no guarantee of when or if you'll be together again?
Exactly. And that's just one story out of so many. For many people, these programs are a lifeline, a glimmer of hope in really desperate situations.
Which is why it's so important for those who are directly affected to be aware of all these moving parts. It's not just about the election, it's about understanding the legal challenges, the bureaucratic hurdles, the potential roadblocks ahead.
You're absolutely right. It's about empowering people with knowledge so they can navigate this complex situation and fight for their futures.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, especially in situations as unpredictable and potentially life-changing as this. So for our listeners who are feeling overwhelmed or unsure, what advice would you give them? What can they do to feel more in control in this situation?
That's a great question, and there are definitely things they can do. First, and this might seem obvious, but stay informed. Don't just rely on social media or what you hear from others.
You're right, it's easy to get caught up in misinformation, especially online.
Look for trustworthy sources, official government websites, reputable news organizations, and groups that specialize in immigration law. These sources can give you more in-depth analysis and help you cut through all the noise.
That's great advice. Knowing where to find accurate information is so important when it comes to something as crucial as immigration. What else can people do to feel more in control of their situation?
Yeah, it can feel like a lot. Elections, lawsuits, these programs changing constantly. So beyond just staying informed, what can our listeners do to feel more empowered in this situation?
Well, information is power, but it's about using it the right way. Don't be afraid to reach out to an immigration lawyer or an advocacy group. They can give you advice specific to your situation and help you understand how these changes might affect you personally. It's easy to feel lost in all of this. So having an expert on your side can make all the difference. They can cut through the confusion and give you some clarity.
Absolutely. And remember, this is something a lot of people are going through. You're not alone. Connecting with others in similar situations can be really powerful. Find online forums, support groups, community organizations where you can talk to people, share experiences and information.
There's something to be said for knowing you're not alone in this. It's about finding that support system.
Exactly. And while staying informed and finding support are both crucial, it's also smart to think about different scenarios and be prepared. Having a plan B, even a plan C, can really help you feel like you have some control even with all the uncertainty.
So thinking through the different outcomes and having a plan for each one.
Right. For example, let's say your case depends on the CFRP program. What would a Trump victory mean for that program? Start researching that now. At the same time, look into other ways to reunite with your family that might not depend so much on one specific program.
Being proactive and prepared instead of just reacting to whatever happens.
Exactly. And finally, never forget that you have a voice. Make it heard. Talk to your elected officials, tell them what you believe in, and fight for the programs and policies that matter to you.
It's easy to feel powerless when things feel so big.
Yeah.
But you're right, our voices together can make a difference. Turn that uncertainty into action.
Absolutely. And amidst all this complexity, all the uncertainty around immigration policy, remember the human side of it all. Remember the families, the hopes, the dreams. Keeping that human element at the forefront is what will lead to a more compassionate and just approach.
That's a powerful point. It's about looking beyond the policies themselves and recognizing the human impact, all the individual stories.
Exactly. Bringing empathy and understanding to a debate that's often very divided.
This has been incredibly insightful. Thank you for breaking down these complicated issues in a way that's both understandable and empowering for our listeners.
It's been my pleasure.
And to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has given you the knowledge and resources you need to navigate these uncertain times. Stay informed, stay connected, we'll continue to follow developing stories and bring you updates as they happen. Until next time, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.